Have you ever noticed how the world seems to panic when you choose to be alone? How people immediately assume something's wrong with you if you decline another social invitation, if you prefer a quiet evening at home over a crowded party, if you actually enjoy your own company. There's this unspoken rule that says being alone equals being lonely, that solitude is something to fix, something to escape from. But what if I told you that your need for solitude isn't a flaw to overcome, but a profound psychological necessity that most people are too afraid to honor? Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, understood something that modern society has forgotten. He knew that the people who run from solitude are actually running from themselves, while those who embrace it discover something extraordinary. Jung said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to express what truly matters to you." And today, I want you to understand why your relationship with solitude reveals everything about your psychological development, and why learning to stop running from it might be the most transformative thing you ever do. We live in a culture that treats solitude like a disease. Every moment of quiet must be filled with noise. Every pause must be occupied with stimulation. Every second alone must be medicated with social media, calls, plans, anything to avoid that terrifying encounter with your own thoughts. But what Jung discovered through decades of research is that this frantic avoidance of solitude isn't protecting you from loneliness. It's creating a much deeper form of disconnection, a disconnection from your own soul. And before we dive deeper into Jung's revolutionary insights about solitude, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. I want to know, do you find yourself running from alone time, or have you learned to embrace it? Your experience might help someone else on this journey. The first thing Jung understood about solitude is that most people confuse it with loneliness, but they are psychological opposites. Loneliness is the pain of being disconnected from others when you desperately want connection. Solitude is the joy of being connected to yourself when you consciously choose that space. The person who runs from solitude isn't avoiding loneliness, they're avoiding self-awareness. Because in silence, without the constant noise of other people's voices, opinions, and energy, you're forced to hear your own inner voice. And for many people, that voice has become a stranger. Jung called this process individuation, the psychological journey of becoming who you truly are rather than who others expect you to be. And here's what most people don't realize. Individuation cannot happen in a crowd. It requires what he called the hermit's journey, a conscious withdrawal from external influences so you can finally hear your authentic self speaking. When you stop running from solitude, you stop running from the most important relationship of your life, the one with yourself. Think about it this way. Every time you fill every quiet moment with external stimulation, every time you panic at the thought of being alone with your thoughts, every time you say yes to social plans when your soul is screaming for rest, you're essentially telling your unconscious mind that it's not safe to be yourself. You're reinforcing the belief that your own company isn't enough, that your inner world isn't valuable, that who you are in silence isn't worth knowing. But Jung discovered something profound about people who learn to embrace solitude. They develop what he called psychological sovereignty, the ability to be whole within themselves rather than dependent on others for their sense of identity and worth. They become what he termed the individuated person, someone who has integrated their conscious and unconscious mind, their light and shadow, their social persona, and their authentic self. Number 1, solitude reveals your authentic desires. When you're constantly surrounded by other people, it's almost impossible to distinguish between what you actually want and what others expect you to want. Jung understood that the crowd consciousness has a hypnotic effect. It makes you unconsciously adopt the desires, opinions, and values of those around you. But in solitude, that external influence fades, and suddenly you can hear your own authentic voice emerging. Most people are terrified of this revelation because they've been living according to other people's scripts for so long that they've forgotten what their own desires actually feel like. Jung said, "Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. When you stop running from solitude, you stop dreaming other people's dreams and start awakening to your own. Maybe in the silence, you realize you don't actually enjoy the career everyone thinks you should love. Maybe you discover that the relationship you're forcing doesn't align with your deepest values. Maybe you understand that the social activities you fill your calendar with are actually draining your energy rather than nourishing your soul. This isn't comfortable knowledge, but it's liberating knowledge. It's the beginning of living your own life rather than performing someone else's version of who you should be." Write in the comments now, "I choose my authentic desires." Say it like you're giving yourself permission to want what you actually want, not what others expect you to want. Number 2, solitude integrates your shadow. Jung's concept of the shadow represents all the parts of yourself that you've rejected, suppressed, or denied because they didn't fit with how you wanted to be seen by others. The shadow contains your anger, your sadness, your fears, your unconventional thoughts, everything you've pushed down to maintain your social image. But here's what Jung discovered. You cannot become whole while rejecting parts of yourself, and you cannot integrate your shadow while constantly performing for others. Solitude provides the safe space where you can finally acknowledge and integrate these rejected aspects of yourself. In the silence, without the pressure to maintain your persona, your shadow can finally speak. Maybe you realize you're angrier than you've allowed yourself to admit. Maybe you discover fears you've been hiding even from yourself. Maybe you recognize desires that don't fit with your carefully constructed self-image. This shadow work can't happen in a coffee shop surrounded by friends or during a phone call with someone who expects you to be positive and put together. It requires the privacy and safety of solitude, where you can be completely honest about who you are, including the parts that aren't pretty or socially acceptable. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. When you stop running from solitude, you stop running from your own darkness, and that's where true wholeness begins." Number 3, solitude develops your psychological strength. Here's something Jung understood that most people miss. The ability to be comfortable in your own company is one of the strongest indicators of psychological maturity. When you can sit alone without needing to fill the silence with distractions, when you can enjoy your own thoughts without needing external validation, when you can feel complete without needing someone else to make you feel worthy, you've developed what Jung called psychological self-sufficiency. This doesn't mean becoming isolated or antisocial. It means developing such a strong relationship with yourself that you interact with others from a place of wholeness rather than neediness. You're no longer using relationships to escape from yourself. You're sharing yourself from a place of abundance. Jung observed that people who are comfortable with solitude actually form deeper, more authentic relationships because they're not desperately clinging to others to avoid their own inner emptiness. Think about the difference between someone who says yes to every social invitation because they're terrified of being alone, and someone who chooses their social interactions consciously because they genuinely want to connect. The first person is running from themselves. The second person is sharing themselves. When you develop comfort with solitude, you transform from someone who needs others to someone who chooses others, and that changes everything about how you relate to people. Hit like if you're ready to develop this psychological strength, and subscribe if you want more insights into Jung's transformative psychology. Number 4. Solitude connects you to the collective unconscious. Jung believed that beneath our individual consciousness lies a deeper layer. He called the collective unconscious a realm of universal human experiences, archetypes, and wisdom that connects all of humanity. But accessing this deeper wisdom requires what he called the descent into solitude, a willingness to go beyond the noise of personal thoughts and social conditioning to touch something more profound. When you're constantly surrounded by external stimulation, you remain on the surface level of consciousness, reacting to immediate circumstances and social pressures. But in deep solitude, especially the kind that makes most people uncomfortable, you can access layers of insight and creativity that aren't available in ordinary social consciousness. Jung himself made his most profound discoveries during periods of intense solitude, when he allowed himself to sink into what he called the depths of the psyche. This is why many of history's greatest artists, writers, philosophers, and innovators were known for their relationship with solitude. They understood intuitively what Jung proved scientifically, that breakthrough insights and authentic creativity emerge from the depths, not from the surface chatter of social consciousness. When you stop running from solitude, you give yourself access to this deeper well of wisdom and creativity. Number 5. Solitude teaches you the difference between being alone and being lonely. This might be Jung's most important insight about solitude. Loneliness is the painful awareness that you're disconnected from meaningful relationships with others. But what Jung discovered is that the people who are most afraid of being alone are often the loneliest, even when they're surrounded by people, because they're using social interaction to avoid the fundamental relationship that makes all other relationships possible, the relationship with themselves. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." What? But you cannot become who you truly are while constantly adapting to other people's expectations and energy. You need solitude to discover your authentic self, to hear your own voice, to understand your own values and desires separate from social influence. When you develop this authentic relationship with yourself, you're never truly alone because you're in good company, your own. The person who has learned to embrace solitude carries a quality that Jung called inner completeness. They don't need others to feel whole, but they can share their wholeness with others. They don't use relationships to fill an inner void. They bring their fullness to relationships. This is the paradox Jung discovered. The people who are most comfortable being alone are often the most magnetic and attractive to others, because they radiate the confidence and authenticity that comes from self-knowledge. Write in the comments, "I am complete within myself." Say it like you're declaring your independence from the need for external validation. But here's where Jung's insight becomes truly revolutionary. He understood that the fear of solitude is actually the fear of discovering who you really are. Most people would rather remain strangers to themselves than risk the discomfort of self-discovery. They'd rather live according to other people's definitions of success, happiness, and fulfillment than do the difficult work of defining these things for themselves. Jung called this phenomenon psychological cowardice, the unconscious choice to remain unconscious rather than face the responsibility of authentic self-knowledge. Because once you know who you really are, once you've heard your authentic voice in the silence of solitude, you can no longer pretend to be satisfied with a life that doesn't align with your true nature. You become responsible for living authentically, and that's both terrifying and liberating. The moment you stop running from solitude is the moment you stop running from your own life. It's the moment you choose depth over surface, authenticity over performance, self-knowledge over social approval. It's the moment you begin what Jung considered the most important journey of human existence, the journey toward becoming who you were always meant to be. And this is where everything changes. When you embrace solitude, you develop what Jung called the unshakable center, an inner stability that doesn't depend on external circumstances or other people's approval. You become someone who can be alone without being lonely, who can be quiet without being bored, who can be still without being restless. You develop the rare ability to be genuinely comfortable in your own skin. People will notice this change in you, even if they can't name what's different. There's something about someone who has made peace with solitude that's magnetic and mysterious. They carry themselves differently. They speak with more authenticity. They're present in a way that people who are constantly running from themselves never are. Jung observed that individuated people, those who have done the work of self-discovery in solitude, have a quality of presence that's both calming and inspiring to others. But the most profound change happens within you. When you stop running from solitude, you stop being afraid of your own mind. You stop needing constant external stimulation to feel okay. You develop what Jung called psychological self-reliance, the ability to find meaning, joy, and fulfillment from within, rather than depending entirely on external sources. This doesn't mean you become antisocial or isolated. It means you interact with the world from a place of choice rather than desperation, from abundance rather than neediness, from authenticity rather than performance. You're no longer using other people to escape from yourself. You're sharing yourself with others from a place of wholeness. Jung believed that this transformation, this movement from running from solitude to embracing it, is essential for what he called the second half of life. The first half of life, he argued, is about building your place in the world, establishing your career, your relationships, your social identity. But the second half of life is about discovering who you are beneath all those external roles and achievements. And this discovery can only happen in solitude. So if you've been running from quiet moments, filling every space with noise and distraction, avoiding the discomfort of being alone with your thoughts, Jung would tell you that you're running from the most important appointment of your life, the appointment with yourself, the person you could become, the wisdom you could access, the peace you could find, the authenticity you could embody. All of it is waiting for you in the solitude you've been avoiding. When you finally stop running and turn to face the silence, you might be surprised by what you find there. Not the emptiness you feared, but a fullness you never knew existed. Not loneliness, but the profound companionship of your own authentic self. Not boredom, but the quiet excitement of self-discovery. Not anxiety, but the deep peace that comes from finally being home within yourself. This is Jung's invitation to you. Stop running from solitude and discover what's been waiting for you there all along. Stop being afraid of your own company and learn to enjoy the conversation you can only have with yourself. Stop using other people to avoid yourself and start using solitude to find yourself. The world will try to convince you that being alone is something to fix, something to escape from, something that means you're not living fully. But Jung knew better. He understood that the people who learn to embrace solitude aren't escaping from life. They're diving deeper into it. They're not avoiding relationships. They're preparing to have authentic ones. They're not running from the world. They're developing the inner strength and self-knowledge to engage with it more fully. So write in the comments now, "I embrace my solitude." Say it like you're making a sacred commitment to yourself. Say it like you're finally ready to meet the person you've been running from your whole life. The person who's been waiting patiently in the silence for you to stop running and come home. Because when you stop running from solitude, everything changes. Your relationship with yourself deepens. Your relationships with others become more authentic. Your creativity flows more freely. Your decisions become clearer. Your inner peace becomes unshakable. You discover that the person you were avoiding in solitude is actually the person you were meant to become. This is Jung's great gift to us, The understanding that solitude isn't the enemy of connection. It's the foundation of it. It's not the opposite of love. It's the place where self-love begins. It's not where you go to escape life. It's where you go to finally start living it authentically. If this message resonates with you, if you're ready to stop running and start embracing the transformative power of solitude, then you've found your place. Subscribe to join a community of people who understand that the journey inward is the most important journey you'll ever take. Because here, we don't just talk about psychology, we use it to transform our lives from the inside out.